Have you ever witnessed your child being publicly humiliated, right in the house you once called home? I have. I saw my daughter Sophie soaked and covered in mud, trembling, as she stood up from a puddle in the backyard of my parents' house. Her face was stunned, unable to comprehend why her own aunt had pushed her down and laughed after saying "little pig." Just like your mom. I want you to picture that moment, the stifling laughter in the air of a Thanksgiving, gathering the averted glances of relatives, and the cold rain beginning to pour, as if the sky itself couldn't look away. If you've ever had to stand up for your child against your own family, I invite you to stay. Hit follow if you believe that family ties are no excuse for causing pain. I'm Rachel, 34, living in Portland, Oregon. I'm a freelance graphic designer. My husband, David, is a software engineer, and my daughter, Sophie, 12, is the light in my scratched-up world. Our little family is the most beautiful thing I've ever had, and it's what I strive to protect every day. I grew up in a quiet suburb of Connecticut. My family wasn't lacking materially. My father was a stern man in finance, while my mother stayed home, the kind of woman who always placed napkins at the right angle on the table. I have an older sister, Heather, 2 years my senior. From childhood, Heather was the embodiment of the perfect child. Blue eyes, blonde hair, slender figure, academically brilliant, outgoing, loved, and favored. I was the opposite, chubby, quietly reading books, preferring to draw over socializing. In my family, that difference wasn't accepted. It was judged. I still vividly remember the first time I was called Piglet. I was 9. Heather was hosting a birthday party in the backyard with over a dozen girls. I just wanted to join in, but as I stepped out with a small piece of cake in hand, Heather laughed, loudly pointed at me and said, "Look, Piglet wants more cake." The laughter erupted. Not from my friends, I didn't have any at that party, but from my sister's friends. Then my mother stepped out from the house. I looked at her pleading with my eyes. She didn't scold Heather or defend me. She only said, "Rachel, you should know better." Those words stuck in my memory as much as the nickname did. I learned to sneak food in the kitchen to lock myself in the bathroom whenever I heard my sister and her friends laughing. I grew up believing I was inherently inferior, a flawed copy. Heather was the cheerleading captain, class president, prom queen. Each of her achievements was celebrated like a national victory. Meanwhile, even when I won a state art competition, all I got was, "That's nice. But you should exercise more to balance things out." I don't know how many times I tried to please my parents. I thought if I were thinner, better they'd notice me. But in our house, Heather took up all the space. She was the spotlight. I was the dim shadow in the wings. Those years didn't kill me, but they left me with a strange defensive instinct. I became quiet but hyper-aware. I could read the subtext in every glance. I could sense favoritism even before it was spoken. When I met David, I was 19, in my second year of art school. He was unlike anyone I'd ever known. He didn't care about my weight, my lack of makeup, or my hairstyle. He asked about my books, my art, and actually listened. On our third date, I ordered a salad out of habit. He looked at me calmly and said, "Order what you really want to eat. I'm here for you, not someone else." I ordered a burger. For the first time in years, I felt free. David was the first person to call out Heather for mocking my appearance. At the first dinner he attended at my house, Heather said, "Wow, someone finally loves short and chubby Rachel." "Huh," David replied without raising his voice. "I love someone with a beautiful heart." Something rare in this house. The silence that followed still echoes in my memory. We married when I was 24. Despite my mother's suggestion to wait until you lose a few pounds for the wedding photos, I wore the dress I chose. At the wedding, Heather wore white as a bridesmaid. I just held David's hand and he whispered, "Don't let her steal your light anymore." When I was 22, I found out I was pregnant. Sophie arrived like a gift. I cried the first time I saw her tiny heartbeat on the ultrasound. I vowed to myself I wouldn't let her grow up feeling like a failure. I raised Sophie with unconditional love. I taught her about kindness, compassion, and self-worth beyond her body. We drew together, read together, built habits I never had, but I knew the outside world wasn't kind. When Sophie was 10, she started to have a rounder figure like mine. I began hearing murmurs from my mother. "She eats well, doesn't she? Or let's hope she doesn't get as big as her mom." I often wanted to stop visiting family, but Sophie would beg I want to see Grandma and Grandpa Emma and Lily. She didn't yet know the scars in that house because I'd shielded her from the storm for so long. I thought I could protect her, until the day I couldn't. I never believed in fate, but one moment in my life made me question that. It was when I held a pregnancy test, saw 2 clear lines. and my heart pounded so hard I thought I'd collapse. Not from fear, but from joy, so immense it tried to fill the old cracks in my heart. I'd sworn that if I had a child, they'd never feel compared, belittled, or called names that hurt their innocent heart. I would break that cycle. Before I go on, if you've ever tried to heal childhood wounds while becoming a parent, hit follow. This story might be the whisper you need to hear. Sophie was born on a drizzly spring morning in Portland. David cried. I didn't. I just held his hand tightly and looked at the tiny red-faced baby, with soft black curls squirming in her swaddle. I didn't cry because I was channeling all my energy into a vow she would grow up loved, not judged. The first 3 years were a gentle dream. We read together every night. David built a small bookshelf for Sophie's stuffed animals. I painted watercolor animals to hang around her room. We didn't have much money, but our home was filled with laughter flower on our noses and crayon scribbles across the kitchen table. Sophie grew like a little sunflower, strong, radiant, and eager to express herself. She loved art early on, cutting and pasting paper coloring on boxes, and sometimes the walls. I never scolded her for it. I just taught her how to clean the marks and smiled. Walls are for protecting us, but paper is for art. When Sophie started first grade, I noticed her body wasn't like her classmates. She was a bit rounder, a bit shorter, just like I was as a child. For the first time, a vague fear crept into my heart. Not because I judged her body, but because I knew how cruel the world could be to kids who didn't fit the mold. I started noticing others' glances. At a family gathering at my in-laws, a cousin looked at Sophie and said, "Wow, she's sturdy just like her mom was." I smiled politely, but my hand tightened on Sophie's shoulder. She didn't say anything, but I'd been that child, and I knew those words always left teeth marks on the heart. When Sophie was 9, we took her to Emma's Heather's daughter birthday party. It was the first time in years I'd let myself step into my sister's space. The house was still glamorous, and Heather was still the cold, perfect version of herself. Emma was neat as a doll hair braided with ribbons, wearing a sequined dress. Sophie wore a hoodie with a flying cat and jeans streaked with paint. At the party, I saw another mother whisper something to Heather, their eyes glancing at Sophie. I also noticed Sophie growing quieter, twisting the hem of her shirt. On the way home, she asked Mom, "Why don't I look like the other kids?" I pulled over, turned to face her, hands still on the wheel. "Look like them, how sweetie. Like, everyone's tall and thin. I feel like a round pancake." Her words cut like an old familiar blade slicing from my ear to my heart. I took a deep breath. You know, when I was your age, they called me Piglet. And no one stood up for me. But I promise I won't let anyone do that to you. Sophie looked at me. Her hazel eyes weren't like mine, but her expression was familiar. It was the look of a child trying to understand the world and their place in it. That night I printed a photo of Sophie grinning at a recent picnic, framed it, and placed it on her desk. Below it I wrote, "You are unique, and you deserve complete love." I started choosing books about body diversity and self-love to read with her. I told her about female artists who defied norms but were still great. I sought out parent groups with similar values to give her a positive environment, but at the same time I couldn't shake the feeling that my past was lurking over my shoulder. I saw Heather's glances at gatherings, the way she smiled at Emma and Lily, differently than at Sophie. I heard my mother still ask Emma about her piano exams, but only say to Sophie, "Are you eating all that, sweetie?" I thought that if I was good enough, different enough, the past wouldn't repeat. But love alone isn't enough without courage. Protecting a child isn't just about hugging them, it's about daring to confront. Sophie deserved a childhood free of shame, and I once again had to learn to stand up for her. Perhaps the first major turning point didn't come from family, but from a seemingly harmless party. And then that Thanksgiving arrived. "Isn't it true that I'm fat, Mom?" That question, uttered in a tiny voice from the back seat, made my heart plummet into a bottomless pit. If you've ever been the child constantly compared, always bowing your head to harsh comments about your appearance from your own family, you'll understand why I wanted to break time itself in that moment. Before I tell you what happened that day, the summer BBQ at my parents' house, you might want to follow the channel, because I believe somewhere in this story, you might see yourself. And perhaps someone you love needs to be heard too. That summer in Portland was brighter than usual. The sun bathed the rooftops, making the green maple leaves glisten with an unusual vibrancy. But in my heart, a gray cloud had begun forming that morning. Our family was invited to my parents' house, where I grew up, for a weekend BBQ. Heather, my sister, would be there too with her husband and two perfect blonde daughters, straight out of a summer magazine. "It'll be fine," David said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder as I tied my hair in front of the mirror. "You say that every time," I replied, forcing a smile, "and I always hope it's true." We arrived on time. My parents' backyard was the same neatly trimmed green lawn, white-painted wooden furniture, and the apple tree I used to climb as a child. My mother had prepared salads, sausages, and the honey-glazed chicken breast my father loved. Heather arrived 10 minutes later with confident strides and lightly curled blonde hair floating in the breeze. Her daughters ran around, their high-pitched laughter echoing through the yard. "Sophie," my mother called out, "you've grown so fast, but looks like you've been eating well this summer, huh?" I froze. David, pouring lemonade, glanced at me as if asking, "Should we step in?" Sophie was smiling, but I saw her eyes waver. It was the same look I'd seen in the mirror every night after childhood dinners. "She's been running with me every morning," I said, keeping my tone cheerful. "Super healthy." Heather let out a laugh, not bothering to hide her mockery. "Probably just around the yard, right?" I turned to her. "Want to race 3 laps around the house right now?" The air went still for a second. Then my father spoke up. "All right, everyone, let's eat. The chicken's about to burn." The meal unfolded with an undercurrent of tension. Every comment, even if wrapped in a smile or soft tone, felt like a knife, grazing the skin of self-esteem. "Heather's girls are so good at keeping in shape," my mother said, adding more salad to Emma's plate. "Lily eats so healthily. They never touch soda," Heather replied, glancing at the soda in Sophie's hand. I gently squeezed Sophie's hand under the table. She kept eating, but I noticed her chew slower, her shoulders hunching. That night on the drive home, Sophie blurted out, "Am I fat? Mom." I nearly slammed on the brakes in the middle of the highway. "Why would you ask that?" "I just heard Grandma and Aunt Heather. Then Emma said I should try eating low-carb like her, but I don't even know what low-carb is." I took a long breath. David drove silently, his eyes focused ahead, tense. I turned to Sophie. "You have a healthy body, and it's something to be proud of. No one has the right to make you doubt that, not even adults." That night, after Sophie went to bed, David and I sat on the couch. The living room lamp cast a soft glow. I held a cup of tea without drinking a sip. "Am I leading her back to the place I wanted to escape?" I said, staring at the staircase to Sophie's room. David didn't answer right away. He placed his hand on mine. "I think you're trying to do everything right, but no one wins alone against a family used to making others feel wrong," I nodded. But the question lingered in my mind all night. What did I do wrong? Taking her to visit grandparents eating BBQ under the summer sun, hearing a few harmless teases. What's so scary about that? Or did it all start from the place where I learned to endure? So now I've unintentionally let her learn it too. The next morning I went into Sophie's room. She was drawing as always. A vibrant painting, our family eating pancakes on a park bench, sunlight filtering through the trees. "Beautiful painting," I said softly. "Sophie, I'm sorry for not standing up for you more clearly yesterday." Sophie looked at me and said, "It's okay, Mom. I'm used to it. I know you love me, and that's enough." I swallowed hard. No, my daughter shouldn't have to get used to comparisons or toxic judgments. There are moments in life when you realize you can't stay silent anymore. And there are holidays meant to bring people together that become the clearest line between love and pain. For me, that Thanksgiving was that line. If you're following this journey, don't forget to hit follow or leave a comment. Maybe you've had to stand up for someone you love, and if so, we have something to share. The car rolled out of Portland as dawn was still breaking. David drove, I sat in the passenger seat, and Sophie was in the back, clutching her leather portfolio filled with her first art collection. She'd spent weeks preparing it, each drawing a tiny piece of her soul, fragile but full of color. We arrived in Connecticut the night before Thanksgiving. My childhood home hadn't changed white picket fence red maples on the porch and the angel statue in the front yard that my mother dusted weekly. But something in me was no longer whole. Maybe because I'd brought a child I'd sworn to protect into a place that once made me lose myself. That morning the sky was overcast and heavy. The clouds seemed to hide the sun as if they knew something was about to break. As soon as we stepped inside, my mother looked Sophie up and down and said, "You've grown so much. Looking healthy, aren't you?" Healthy, that word felt like a code. I squeezed Sophie's hand gently. She smiled, but her eyes blinked faster than usual. Heather appeared next in an elegant ivory wool dress. Emma and Lily, her daughters, were dressed like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Emma glanced at Sophie. "Oh, cute dress a bit. Bold, huh?" Lily added, "Mom, did we bring a spare dress just in case it gets dirty?" Heather gave a light laugh, the kind I'd heard all through my childhood. Don't worry, the girls know how to take care of themselves. Sophie blushed. I whispered in her ear, "Your dress is beautiful. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." At noon, the kids ran out to the backyard to play. It had just rained lightly, leaving the yard wet with puddles and patches of mud. Sophie carried her portfolio, holding it like a treasure. She wanted to find the right moment to show it off. After the main meal, as everyone sipped tea and ate apple pie, Sophie stood up hesitantly. "I brought some drawings. I made them in art class at school." My mother nodded, barely looking up from the TV. Heather smirked. "Probably watercolors Lily used to draw in kindergarten. She's outgrown that now." Sophie still opened her portfolio, pulling out each piece. There was a portrait of me in the garden, a scene of a lake at dawn, and a collage mimicking light through a window. David exclaimed, "Amazing, kiddo." "I love the lake one." Emma snickered. "Looks like something you'd stick on the fridge when you were little." Sophie froze. I saw her lips tighten. But what I didn't expect was still to come. As I went to the kitchen to grab a shawl for Sophie, I heard a scream from the backyard. I ran out to find Sophie sprawled in a large mud puddle near the steps. Her new dress was soaked, her hair caked with mud, and her drawings, each one, were smeared and torn. Heather stood on the steps, hands on hips, "Little pig, just like your mom." I froze. That phrase I'd heard it 100 times from her as a child, but this time it pierced straight into my daughter. David didn't say a word. He stepped forward, took off his jacket, and draped it over Sophie's shoulders. He knelt down, hugged her, and whispered, "Daddy's here. You're okay now." I ran to Sophie, choking, Who pushed you?" Sophie sobbed. "I was just stepping up, and Aunt Heather pushed me. I didn't do anything wrong, Mom." Everyone was silent. No one defended her. My father sighed and looked away. My mother muttered, "Goodness, making a big deal out of this." David turned to the family we're leaving now. "Thank you for reminding me why Rachel didn't want to come back here." He helped Sophie up. I grabbed her bag and we walked out of the house I once called home. The sky poured rain. Not heavily, but enough to chill us to the bone. In the car, Sophie cried silently. I turned to the back seat, looking into her pained but unbroken eyes. That pain was the same one I'd carried for 30 years. David squeezed my hand on the wheel. "You didn't bring her back to the place you escaped. You protected her by leaving. That's the difference." I didn't answer, but for the first time I believed it. We got home near midnight. In the bathroom, as I washed the mud-stained dress, Sophie whispered, "Mom, am I fat?" I choked. "No, you're like me. And I've learned that this body doesn't need anyone's judgment but my own." Sophie nodded. She curled into my arms, whispering, "I don't hate Aunt Heather, but I don't want to be like her." "Then you're already stronger than I was at your age, Sophie." I held her tight, feeling as if an old door had finally closed. And then a few days later, something unthinkable happened, a message from Heather. That day, I was wrong. "Can you meet me for coffee? There's something of Sophie's you need to read." I stared at the words, a mix of suspicion and a faint glimmer of something fragile. Can people truly change? The answer perhaps lies in a letter never sent. I once thought shouting was the scariest thing in a broken family. But no silence is the deepest cold, the kind that leaves you gasping as if adrift in an endless ocean. After that horrific Thanksgiving, I blocked everything. Messages, calls, emails, even the blinking typing. Dots never had a chance to appear. Not because I didn't want an apology, but because I knew none would truly come. And as I expected, the first thing my mother said in a voicemail was, "I think you're overreacting. Heather said it was just an accident." An accident. A child pushed into the mud in the rain in front of the entire family called Little Pig, and it was just an accident. Heather texted me one short line, "We were just playing." You know, Sophie can be dramatic sometimes. I read it 3 times, sighed, and blocked her number. Sophie wasn't herself in the days that followed. She was worryingly quiet, often retreating to her room to draw, but no longer showing her art. The red dress, now clean, hung in front of her room like a silent reminder. One morning I brought her toast and found her staring into the mirror. "I'm really fat, aren't I, Mom?" The question, light as a breath, was enough to crush my heart. I sat beside her gently, pulling her hand away from her stomach, which she was trying to hide under her nightgown. "Sophie, your body isn't the problem. The problem is how others look at it. You don't have to become thin to make them comfortable." She nodded, but her eyes dropped. I knew my words weren't enough. I'd been that child. I knew too well this kind of hurt doesn't vanish in one conversation. That night, as David and I sat on the couch, the neighbors' kids rode bikes outside, as if no one had ever been hurt. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" I asked, eyes fixed on the window. "About what?" "Cutting them off completely. No calls, no explanations, no chances." David was quiet for a few seconds. "You've given them chances for 34 years. And that day they didn't just hurt you, they hurt Sophie. I think you're doing what a mother needs to do, protect her." I pursed my lips. The anger was still there, mixed with something close to guilt. I'd brought Sophie to a place I knew wasn't safe just because I wanted to believe in a better version of family. David looked at me, his eyes gentle but firm. "I think it's time we see a professional, for both of you." I was surprised. "You mean therapy?" He nodded. "I think you're carrying a lot, and Sophie's learning to swallow it. If we don't step in early, she might grow up with the same wounds you carried." The following week, I booked an appointment with a family therapist. The waiting room smelled of citrus oil, and soft piano music played. Sophie doodled on a blank sheet, while I filled out forms. When it was our turn, the therapist, a middle-aged woman with a warm voice and genuinely attentive eyes, started with a simple question. "Rachel, what brought you here today?" I gave a sad smile, because I don't want my daughter to grow up losing faith in family like I did. We talked about my past, the favoritism in my family, the piglet nickname, and that muddy day. Sophie was quiet most of the time, but at one point she whispered, "I just wanted them to like me, like they like Emma and Lily." My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. We continued therapy for weeks. Sophie opened up more. I learned to stop blaming myself. And David, he was always there, a steady listener when I needed to stop pretending to be strong. One evening, while cleaning the kitchen, I accidentally opened an old email inbox. An unread message from my mother popped up. "Dear, I think that day was a misunderstanding. Heather says Sophie's a bit sensitive. I think we should sit down together as a family." I closed the email without replying. My mother still didn't get it. The issue wasn't sensitivity, it was a system that chose silence when cruelty happened. But then something unexpected occurred. One Saturday morning my phone buzzed. The caller's name made me freeze for a few seconds. "Heather." I hesitated, then answered. "Rachel." Her voice was different. No trace of her usual arrogance. "I know you don't want to hear from me, and I don't blame you, but if you'd allow it, I'd like to meet for coffee." Before I could respond, she continued, "And I have something for you. A letter Sophie wrote. It fell out of her backpack that day. I kept it, meaning to return it, but didn't get the chance. Until now." My heart skipped a beat. A letter. I've never read anything that made me feel like this. I never thought I'd be the adult who scared a child. Her words left me unable to refuse. We agreed to meet that Sunday afternoon at a small cafe near Forest Park. When I arrived, Heather was already there holding a small lavender envelope. She handed it to me. "Read it when you're ready. For now. I just want to say I'm sorry." I clutched the letter, not opening it yet. In my heart, emotions swirled: anger, doubt, pain, and a faint spark of something like hope. Some wounds don't bleed, but they hurt just as much when touched. And yet, some days those wounds begin to heal not with a bang, but with small, gentle moments. If you've walked away from a painful past and are learning to rebuild a home with your own hands, stay. This story doesn't promise healing, but it might whisper to you you're not alone. I didn't read Sophie's letter the day Heather gave it to me. I kept it in my purse for 2 days, as if waiting for a sacred moment to open it. That moment came on a winter evening, with Portland draped in light rain. David was washing dishes Sophie was drawing at the kitchen table. I pulled out the lavender envelope and said softly, "I have something you wrote, but never sent." Sophie looked up, eyes wide. I placed the letter in front of her. She recognized her handwriting and gasped. "That's the letter I wrote to Aunt Heather. After Thanksgiving." I sat beside her and opened it. My voice trembled as I read the purple ink smudged by sunlight. "Dear Aunt Heather, I don't know if you write letters to grown-ups like this, but today I feel sad. I see you smile at Emma and Lily, but you never smile at me like that. I don't know why. Is it because I'm fatter? Because I don't wear pretty dresses? Because I like drawing, and I'm not good at talking like my cousins? I don't blame you. I just wish you'd smile at me like you do with them. I'll forgive you if one day you really want to start over. Sophie." When I looked up, Sophie's eyes were red. She mumbled I didn't think anyone would read it. I squeezed her hand gently, but she did. And maybe for the first time she understood. From that day, we didn't talk much about Heather or my parents. Not out of avoidance, but because we were building a new life where they weren't the center. David suggested something that sounded silly at first. Let's start new traditions. I laughed. Traditions are built over generations, you know. He winked. Then let's be the first generation. And so we began. 1. Family dinners, no devices. Every night, no matter how busy the three of us ate together, no phones, no emails. Just food small talk and lots of laughter. 2. Unsent letters. Each week we wrote a letter to someone who made us sad, happy, grateful, or missed. We didn't send them. We just wrote folded and tucked them into a small wooden box David made. Sophie wrote to her grandmother, to Emma, even to the maple tree in the backyard. I wrote to my mother, to Heather, to my 10-year-old self. 3. One kind act a day. It didn't have to be big. Pick up litter, give a sincere compliment, hug a little longer. Each night we shared our kind act. One day Sophie said I gave my pudding to a classmate who forgot her lunch. She said I was the first to do that. I looked at David and knew these small traditions were saving our family bit by bit. In therapy, Sophie started talking more. She shared about the first time she was called fat, her pride, when her teacher praised her art, and her fear that because I'm not like my cousins, I'll be hated. I sat beside her each session, peeling back another layer of protection. I told the therapist how I'd endured, how I'd learned to stay silent to be loved, and how I was now learning to speak truth, to not trade love for suffering. One evening, Sophie handed me a new drawing. It was a small house in the rain with golden light spilling from the windows. Inside, 3 sculpted people played a board game laughing. Below she wrote, "Real family," where you don't have to apologize for being yourself. I cried. Not from sadness, but because for the first time I felt I'd done something right. One day Sophie asked Mom, can we see Grandma and Grandpa again? The question caught me off guard. Do you want to... I'm not sure. I just thought, if I feel okay, would you go with me? I paused, then nodded. When you're ready, I'll be there. But this time, if anyone hurts you, I won't stay silent. She smiled, her eyes holding something mature. Then maybe one day, but not now. That night, David hugged me in the kitchen as Sophie folded clothes in her room. How do you feel, he asked. Like I'm breathing deeply for the first time. I'm not fully okay, but I believe I'm on the right path. David kissed my forehead. Sometimes you rebuild a home from the rubble of old ones. But the new home can be stronger than anything before. I nodded, smiling. I don't need it perfect. Just real. The next morning, I opened my inbox. A new email from Heather. No explanations, no excuses. Just a photo of Sophie's letter, "I'll forgive you if one day you really want to start over." Below, Heather wrote by hand, "I don't expect forgiveness right away, but I truly want to learn to start again if you'll let me." I looked at the photo, then out to the backyard. Sophie was drawing sunlight glinting in her hair like something new. Can you start over? Can a fractured family learn to heal? The answer will come soon enough. Some meetings aren't planned by the heart, but they're what it needs most to begin forgiving. That morning, as I brewed coffee, my phone buzzed. A message popped up, Rachel. If you're okay with it, I'd like to invite you for coffee, just to say one thing. And to give you this. Sender Heather. I stood still for a few minutes. Outside, Portland was shrouded in fog, like an old photo half developed. Deep in my heart, I wasn't as angry as before. I still remembered, still hurt, but maybe at this moment I was calm enough to open a door. I replied simply, tomorrow. The little cafe at 33rd and Hawthorne. 10 a.m. David just looked at me, not asking. He only said, if you need me there, I'll be with you. I smiled and shook my head. The next morning I arrived 10 minutes early. The small cafe smelled of waffles and espresso. The table by the window was free, so I took it. Heather arrived on time. No glamorous dress this time. She wore a beige sweater, simple jeans, hair loosely tied. She looked like she'd shed a familiar thin armor. We sat, ordered drinks. I chose chamomile tea. Heather got a sugar-free latte. She opened her bag, pulled out a small lavender envelope and handed it to me. I found this in Sophie's backpack that Thanksgiving. It fell out when I was picking up her things. When she fell. I meant to return it right away, but I didn't dare. Until now. I took the envelope. My heart slowed. In the top left corner, Sophie's familiar, childish handwriting to Aunt Heather. Heather gripped her latte tightly. I read it. And I didn't think a child could write something like that. Or rather, I didn't think I was someone who'd make a child write a letter like that. I opened the letter. The purple ink was slightly smudged. Dear Aunt Heather, I don't hate you. I'm just sad. I know I'm not like Emma or Lily. I don't have blonde hair or talk well, but I can draw. And I love my mom. I hope one day you'll smile at me like you do with them. I still love you, and I'll forgive you if one day you truly want to start over. Sophie. I set the letter down. My eyes stung. Not because of the words, but the voice. In every letter I heard Sophie's true voice, soft, brave, and more forgiving than I'd ever dared imagine. Heather lowered her head, her voice hoarse. I thought I was just teaching my kids to be better. But I was using harshness to hide my fear of being judged. And then, I started imposing that on others. On you. On Sophie. I stayed silent. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I wasn't sure what I truly wanted to say. I never thought I was a bad adult, Heather continued until I read that letter. And looked back. I mocked you, belittled how you raise your kid. But you never struck back. I looked up at the woman I'd once loved, then feared, then distanced myself from. Not because I'm noble, I replied, but because I learned reacting the old way only keeps the cycle going. Heather looked at me for a long time. Then she said softly, "So, if I want to step out of that cycle, will you give me a chance?" That question didn't have an immediate answer. I needed time. Sophie needed time. But for the first time, I didn't close the door. I tucked the letter into my purse. I'll think about it. For now, you could start by writing to Sophie. Heather nodded, and I knew, though it wasn't yet forgiveness, it was at least a starting point. We left the cafe in silence, but it wasn't heavy. Portland's sky that day broke into rare sunlight like a small sign from the universe that maybe things could be different. That night I placed the letter on the dining table next to the cookies Sophie had just baked. She read it, said nothing. Only when she crawled into my bed that night, she hugged me tightly, I wrote that letter. Not to forgive right away, but to give myself a chance not to stay angry forever. I held her close, whispering, "Then you've understood something adults sometimes take a lifetime to learn." My daughter somehow was healing me too. But would Heather truly change? Could our family write a new chapter after all that had shattered? Forgiveness isn't erasure, and love doesn't mean unconditional endurance. I once believed that if I was patient enough, soft enough, the cracks in our family would heal on their own. But I learned healing can't come from one side alone. Forgiveness is a journey, and everyone must walk their own path. On a Sunday morning, as Portland's sunlight streamed through the curtains, I sat with David in the kitchen, filled with the smell of pancakes and roasted coffee. Sophie was still asleep. I opened my laptop fingers on the keyboard, unsure where to begin. David poured more coffee, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Writing a letter," I nodded. "Not to blame, to set boundaries. I need to say clearly if they want to reconnect. They have to do their part." David looked at me thoughtful. "You know I support you. But I want to be sure, are you writing because you're ready to forgive, or because you feel guilty for not forgiving?" I looked at him silent for a moment. "I'm not forgiving yet. But I think, if I don't speak clearly, silence will become a locked door forever. I don't want Sophie to learn to love through avoidance. I want her to know you can love and still set boundaries." David smiled. He didn't say more, just squeezed my shoulder. That quiet support made me stronger bit by bit. I opened a new email. "To Mom and Daddy. Subject, if you want to start over. Mom, Dad, this isn't a letter of blame. If I wanted to point fingers, I'd have done it long ago. But now I'm writing not out of resentment. I'm learning to rebuild trust if it can truly be rebuilt. Sophie and I were hurt. Not just by what happened on Thanksgiving, but by the silence, denial, and dismissal afterward. Calling it a misunderstanding or oversensitivity only made it more painful. I'm not asking for an immediate apology. I just want to know, are you willing to look back, listen, and truly do your part to heal this relationship? If the answer is yes, here's what I need. A conversation where Sophie's and my feelings are heard without being dismissed. A commitment to no more comments about appearance bodies or how I raise my child. And above all, sincerity. No pretense, no avoidance. If you truly want to reconnect, I'm open. But I'm no longer the child who has to try to be loved. Rachel. I reread the letter twice, then hit send. No expectations, no nerves. Just a lightness in my heart. That afternoon, Sophie sat by the window with her watercolors and paper. I made her a cup of warm milk and sat beside her. "What are you painting?" I asked. "A painting called Forgiveness," Sophie replied, not looking up. I watched her gently pull the brush. In the painting, a woman and a child held a heart stitched together with red thread. Above were torn clouds, but in the distance a faint sunlight glowed. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "What do you think about forgiveness?" Sophie set her brush down, tilting her head. "I think forgiveness is like mending something torn. It never looks the same, but if you sew it well, it's still warm." I was speechless. My daughter, once again, said something adults take lifetimes to understand. That evening, as I folded clothes, David walked in holding a small blue card with Sophie's scribbled handwriting, for Mom and Dad. Inside was a short note. "Every day I see Mom smile as a small piece put back in my heart. Thank you, Mom, for teaching me forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but not letting wounds control your heart forever." Sophie. I cried, but these were tears of relief, of gratitude. That night, after Sophie was asleep, David and I sat on the porch, looking out at the dark yard. The summer insects hummed softly. I said I think forgiveness isn't just letting others back into your life. It's letting yourself move forward without carrying stones. David nodded. "You're doing what many don't dare. You're not running away, but you're not letting yourself get pulled back into the old ways." I leaned into his shoulder. "I'm not ready to forgive, but I'm ready to try opening my heart. On the condition it has to be respected." David held my hand. We sat like that for a long time. The next morning I got a reply from my mother. The first line made my heart skip. "Dear, I don't know where to start, but I think I've never listened to you enough. If you're ready, I want to hear more. Truly hear." I stared at the screen. I didn't know if it was real, but maybe something, however small, was shifting. Would that shift be enough to build a new home, or just a temporary bridge over a chasm I still don't know? Some steps forward don't look grand. They don't ring like victory bells. They're just a gentle nod, a handwritten invitation with a trembling hand, and a fragile hope that this time people will show up without judgment. The idea came from David. One June evening as Portland warmed and the trees along Forest Park blazed green. "How about a family picnic?" he suggested, packing away leftover dinner. I raised an eyebrow. "You're joking, right?" "No, but a selective family picnic," he grinned. "Only invite those ready to come, and leave their biases at home." I sat quietly. Part of me reacted with fear of repeated hurt, fear of misplaced hope. But another part, a whisper of hope, crept through the cracks. David continued. "We can't wait forever for someone to change completely, but we can create a test space. Set clear terms. Those who accept can come. Those who can't can wait." I looked at him like he'd said something too simple to believe. "For Sophie," he said softly. I nodded. "For her. For the way she looked at us every time she asked about her grandparents, and I had no easy answer to give. I wrote the invitation on Wednesday morning with a clear commitment. Our family is hosting a picnic this Sunday at Forest Park. This is a sincere invitation, but it comes with conditions. Only those ready to join without prejudice, judgment, or negative comments. Come with an open heart. If you're not ready, we respect that, and we'll wait for another time." I sent it to my mom, dad, and Heather, and waited. By noon, Heather replied, "First, I'll be there, and I'll bring homemade pie. See you." That afternoon, my mother texted, "We'll bring the egg salad you like. Thank you for giving us a chance." I looked at the screen. My heart didn't lighten right away, but something was stirring. Sunday. Early morning, David and I prepared food, grilled chicken sandwiches, fruit mint lemonade. Sophie carefully packed snacks she'd made, labeling them with markers. For Grandma, for Aunt Heather, for Grandpa. David hung a small wooden sign, "Safe zone, no judgment, only listening." We arrived at the park early, choosing a spot near the lake. The sun was gentle, birds chirped in the distance, and other families spread picnic blankets at a private distance. At 10:30, Heather arrived carrying a warm apple tart. No fancy dress, no heels. She wore a simple shirt hair, neatly tied. When she saw Sophie, she smiled, a real smile. "I brought this for you," she said, handing Sophie a small card. Sophie opened it. Inside, "I'm sorry for the times I forgot you're a child who needs love, not fixing." Sophie didn't say anything, but I saw her grip the card lightly and nod. Soon after my parents arrived, my father carried the egg salad. My mother brought iced tea. No one mentioned the past. No judging looks. Just awkward but honest small talk. "You still doing graphic design?" my mother asked. "Yes. I'm illustrating a children's book about a boy building a paper bridge between two islands that won't talk to each other." My mother paused, then said, "Sounds like what we just went through. I want to read it when you're done." My heart softened. not entirely at ease. But for the first time I felt she was listening without adding anything. We ate lunch in a surprisingly light atmosphere. Heather helped David pour drinks. My father told stories about when I scribbled on walls as a kid. Sophie laughed, her mouth smeared with lemonade. I looked around wondering if this was a test. How well was it succeeding? In the afternoon, as the air cooled, Heather sat beside me on the grass. Could you imagine a day like this would come? I shook my head no, but I hoped. She nodded. After a pause, she said, "You know, when I read Sophie's letter, I cried alone in my car. Not out of guilt, but because for the first time, I saw myself through a child's eyes, and I wasn't someone good." I placed my hand on the box, holding the old card. A breeze carried the scent of grass and apple pie. "But maybe looking back is the first step to change," I said. Heather's eyes welled up. "If you give me another chance, I'll learn. Not to get everything right, but to stop causing pain." I didn't promise, but I smiled. A nod was enough for an answer. The picnic ended with a hug. Not tight, not overly emotional, but real. Sophie gave everyone a sticker she'd designed. My parents left early. Heather stayed to help clean up. On the drive home, Sophie leaned on my shoulder in the car. "Mom." "Yeah, everyone today wasn't like before. What do you think about that?" "I think if you set boundaries, maybe people learn how to step in." I squeezed her hand. Perhaps she'd understood the lesson it took me so long to learn. But could one picnic truly start a new chapter? Or was it just a temporary pause before another wave? Not all magic comes in silence. Some arrive quietly in small actions, a familiar dish, a clumsily written card, or an awkward hug. But in those seemingly small things, something had changed. Forever. That morning I still wasn't sure what would happen. Though the first picnic went smoothly, part of me feared it was just a fleeting good moment, and reality would pull us back to the old ways. But when I saw Heather approaching, carrying a pot of roasted chicken, and my parents pulling a cart with a familiar childhood box, I knew this time they didn't just show up to be present. They came to try. "Do you remember this dish?" my mother asked Sophie, lifting the lid. The smell of mushroom rice rolls wafted up, taking me back to first-grade afternoons. Sophie's eyes lit up. "It's the dish Grandma made when I was in kindergarten," Mom told me. My mother smiled a smile, both relieved and shy. For the first time, I saw her try to connect with Sophie through memory, not standards. David set up the table, spreading a checkered cloth. I brought mint lemonade. Heather sat down, holding a small yellow card. "This is for you," she said to Sophie, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm not good at writing, but I wanted to say this sincerely." Sophie took the card. David and I stayed quiet, letting her handle it. She opened it, reading softly. "I'm sorry for hurting you. I was wrong, and I'm trying to make it right. You don't have to forgive me now, but I'll wait and I'll learn." Sophie looked at Heather, then said nothing. Instead, she dug into her backpack, pulling out 3 small framed drawings, each carefully wrapped in plastic. Handing them to Heather, she said, "Can you keep these?" Heather opened the first, forgiveness, the woman and child holding a stitched heart. The second, real family, a group of diverse people under a roof labeled safe. The third made Heather choke up, people can change a wooden door, slightly open. Light spilling out with the words, but only if they truly want to. Heather cried, not loudly, but tears she didn't try to hide. "I didn't know you understood so much," she said softly. Sophie just smiled, then leaned her head on my shoulder. I stroked her hair, my eyes misty. The meal unfolded differently. No tense silence, no veiled jabs and smiles. Just gentle questions, small laughs, and a feeling that we were crossing an unfinished bridge, but at least everyone was laying bricks. My mother shared a story about when I broke a porcelain plate but didn't admit it. My father laughed, and Heather winked at Sophie, "Just like your mom." Back then, if anyone bullied her, I'd make them stop playing. A cousin sitting near Sophie whispered, "She's so much like her mom, but stronger in many ways." I heard it, and my heart swelled. Not for the praise, but because it was the first time someone in the family acknowledged the continuation. Not with expectations, but with understanding. After the meal, Sophie spread her drawings on the grass like a mini exhibition. Everyone sat in a circle looking at each piece. "When did you draw so much?" my mother asked. "Since I found drawing helps me feel less sad." "But lately I draw to capture beautiful things too," Sophie replied. Heather sat quietly beside me. After a while, she said, "You know, I used to think doing right meant keeping standards, keeping the mold. But now I see. Maybe right is knowing how to change." I turned, giving a small smile. I just wanted you to listen. But now I'm learning to speak so you can hear. She nodded for the first time, not defensive. Then let's learn again. Start again. No rush. I squeezed her hand lightly. A small touch, the first in years. As the sky darkened, David called everyone for a group photo. We lined up. Sophie stood between me and Heather. When the camera clicked, I felt her small hand grip mine tightly. After the picnic, as the car rolled away from the park, Sophie sat in the back, still holding the card. Mom. Yeah. I think people can be wrong. But if they know they're wrong and try to fix it, I think I can forgive them. I turned, looking at her through the rearview mirror. I think that's real forgiveness. She smiled lightly. Then I guess I just forgave. That night, I wrote in my journal, forgiveness doesn't come in a flash. It comes like light seeping through small cracks. Today, that light found its way in. But would everyone keep walking this path of learning? Or was something still hidden behind today's easier smiles? There's a truth I learned late. Family isn't always right. It doesn't have to be perfect. But if there's enough love and willingness to change, it can still be a safe place to return to. After that summer picnic, the changes weren't dramatic. No one said, from now on, we're a different family. But that silence made me notice the small things that seemed insignificant, but were actually a long journey. One weekend afternoon, Sophie and I visited Heather's house. For the first time in years, I stepped into that home without fear of being scrutinized or mocked. Emma and Lily, Heather's daughters, were playing Uno with Sophie. I made tea in the kitchen with Heather, feeling the space free of tension for the first time. Suddenly, a sharp laugh came from the living room. Sophie purple again. You've got such unique taste. Lily said it with that old look, the one that pierced me as a child. My heart paused. But before I could react, Heather stepped into the living room, her voice stern but calm. Lily, you don't mock someone like that, especially about their taste or preferences. If you can't play kindly, you don't play. The room went silent. Sophie looked at me surprised. I was too. Not because Heather intervened, but how she did it. No fear of losing face. No letting it slide because it was small. Back in the kitchen, she poured more tea, eyes fixed on the cup I used to think silence kept the peace. Now I know sometimes silence just creates kids who learn to stay silent like me. I nodded, feeling a change being nurtured not loudly, but real. A few days later, my mother called. Are you free? I wanted to ask about your project. I saw you posted a picture online, something for a kid's book. I froze for a second. My mother asking about my work, not to compare, not to critique, just to know. I answered cautiously. Yeah, I'm illustrating a short story for kids. About a boy building a paper bridge between two islands that won't talk to each other. She paused, then said, Sounds like what we just went through. I want to read it when you're done. My heart softened, not fully at ease. But for the first time I felt she was listening, without adding anything. One evening, as I folded clothes, Sophie walked in holding her sketchbook. Mom, today I talked to my friend Anna in class. She said her parents are divorced, and every time she's with one, it feels different. She doesn't know where home is. I looked at her. And what did you say? I said, home is where you can be yourself without being compared. I smiled. Who taught you that? You, who else? She grinned. I pulled her close, kissing her forehead. Then I said, family isn't always right. But if they learn to love again, it can still be a place to come back to. Sophie nodded, then pulled a new drawing from her backpack. 2 islands, a paper bridge between them, with people holding hands across it. I whispered, a paper bridge is still strong, if everyone steps lightly. That Sunday we went to my parents for dinner. The main dish was the fried chicken my mother made when I was in middle school. Not fancy, not new, but the taste of childhood. The meal was normal. But that normal, no tension, no awkward silence made me realize we were becoming a different family. Not perfect, but learning to love again. As I helped my mother wash dishes, she handed me a dry towel and said softly, I know I wasn't the best mother, but I'm trying. For you, for Sophie, and for myself too. I turned, taking her hand, I know, and I see it. Thank you for trying to change. That night on the drive home, Sophie sat in the back, sketching by the light of a small flashlight. Mom, today Grandma didn't mention diets, or ask why I ate so much. Yeah, I noticed. Maybe she's learning, Sophie said, then bent back to her drawing. A minute later, she showed me. A heart stitched with thread, with light shining through the center. I call it growing heart. A heart that's growing. And learning. I was speechless. But would everyone keep walking this learning path? Or was someone still hiding a truth? There's a truth I feared admitting: things will never go back to how they were. But then I realized some cracks don't need to vanish. They just need to be acknowledged, named, and lived with as part of something real, not perfect, but sincere. Fall in Oregon came later than I expected. The leaves were still green, but the air had a chill. David suggested, how about camping this weekend? I looked at Sophie. She nodded enthusiastically. So we packed the tent, sleeping bags, and a mini stove, leaving Portland early Saturday morning for Lake Trillium, a place tied to one of my rare, happy childhood memories. We set up the tent on a grassy patch by the lake, its mirror-like surface reflecting the snow-capped Mount Hood in the distance. David busied himself with the fire, Sophie spread a picnic blanket, and I brewed coffee in our trusty collapsible pot. A quiet enveloped us, not the quiet of distance, but of fullness. I realized it had been a long time since I felt peace in its truest sense. That evening around the campfire, Sophie leaned on my shoulder holding a cup of hot cocoa. "Mom," she whispered. "Yeah?" "Do you think if Aunt Heather hadn't pushed me into the mud that day, everything would still be pretending to be okay?" I looked at her. In the firelight, her face was both innocent and strikingly sharp. Maybe, I replied. Maybe we'd still be smiling at gatherings, hearing sugar-coated judgments, and letting them slide like I used to. "So, that day was actually lucky?" she asked softly. I gave a sad smile, maybe a gift wrapped in mud. Sophie giggled. "You're so weird with words, Mom." I looked at her, her small hand gripping mine. In that moment, I felt like I was holding my own childhood, but this time, I wouldn't let it slip. I turned to David. He smiled, pouring more cocoa for us all. No words needed, but I knew he understood. That night, in the tent tucked into sleeping bags, Sophie asked, "Do you think people will ever stop hurting each other?" I shook my head no. But I think now people know hurt can't be hidden. And when it surfaces, you either face it or let it fester. And we chose to face it. "Yeah, it's not easy, but it's right." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I think our family isn't going back to how it was. But I don't need it to. I just need real." I hugged her, me too. The next morning, the sun peeked through the pines, casting light on the lake like shattered glass. We brewed coffee, toasted cheese sandwiches, and drew with chalk on rocks. Sophie drew a house with no walls, just a roof. Above it, she wrote, "Where love is chosen, not forced." I took a photo with my phone, part to keep, part to remind myself choosing love is a daily act, not a one-time event. Back home, I got an email from my mother. "I reread your June letter. I printed it and keep it on my desk. Every time I'm about to say something unnecessary, I read it again. I know I'm still learning, but I want you to know I'm following you slowly but truly." I teared up, not from pain, but because for the first time the past was seen clearly, no excuses, no denial. A week later, Heather sent a photo of her family volunteering at a soup kitchen. "Emma says my cooking's not great yet, but she's not mocking like before," she captioned jokingly. I texted back progress. "Starting with yourself is the hardest." She replied, "Thanks to you. Thanks to Sophie." I looked at the message, my heart easing. That night, with Sophie asleep, I stepped onto the porch. David brought 2 cups of ginger tea and sat beside me. "Not bad, huh?" he asked. I nodded, not perfect, but no more pretending. We clinked cups, silent, peaceful. I thought back on the past year, from the fall in the mud to therapy, to unsent letters to a picnic that started anew. And now, a new family. Not built on rosy memories, but on sincere daily effort. I turned to David. "I don't want to go back to how things were." He asked, "And where do you think we're going now?" I smiled. "We're not going back. We're moving forward." On my desk now sit 3 small paintings. Forgiveness, a stitched heart. Real family, an open-roofed home. People can change a door with light streaming through. And I know a new chapter doesn't start with a tidy ending. It starts with a choice. The choice to love. The choice to be real, and the choice to move forward together. So ends my and my family's journey here. Ju Yu Hui Gwen Wang here. From old wounds that seemed frozen to honest conversations, each of us has learned to move forward without looking back. This story isn't to paint a perfect family. It's a reminder anyone can be wrong, but anyone can learn to love again. That forgiveness isn't a moment, but a journey. And that a real family isn't free of hurt. It's where people take responsibility and try for each other. If you see yourself in these pages, remember you're not alone, and you deserve a safe home, even if you must build it from scratch. Thank you for listening to the end. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and follow the channel to explore more healing journeys with me. We'll meet again on the path of truth and love.